Old Testament in Ecclesiastes chapter 12. We're looking at the whole chapter. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 1 to 14. And this is also printed, the text is also printed on page 3 of your bulletin. Listen now to God's Word, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 1 to 14. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, and the doors in the street are shut, when the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because man is going to his eternal home. And the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying, and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God, and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You know, I was reading an article yesterday about these researchers in Europe. Apparently, they have arrived through their study at the conclusion that there is a ceiling, there is a cap to the human lifespan, the length of years of one's life. And they've capped it at about 114 for women, and men, it's 113. Okay? And so, based on their study, it's still to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. But based on their study, they found that even though life expectancy is actually increasing because of medicine, because people now have better access to medical procedures and medication, people now have a higher life expectancy. We have lower mortality rates, for example, when it comes to young children. And for the older folks, they grow older. We have more senior citizens. Now, 65 is the year for senior citizens, but if you look, the 65-year-olds now, they're very strong. They're doing their Zumba, they're doing their exercises. Life expectancy is increasing. However, the cap is still unmoved. It's at 150, 114 or 113. All this is to say, you and I are going to get there one day. And so today, as we continue our study of Ecclesiastes, I know we still have about 4 chapters left in the book. We ended last week at chapter 8. Okay? But today, I'd like us to actually look at the last chapter. Okay? This is going to be the last in our series in the book of Ecclesiastes. Maybe in sometime in the future, we'll go back at chapters 9 to 11. But I'll give you the reason why we're not doing chapters 9 to 11. And we're jumping to chapter 12. The 3 chapters, 9, 10, and 11, pretty much contain proverbs and sayings. Okay? So it's more of a collection. And that's also what we read here in chapter 12, right? One of the things that the preacher does is he arranged many proverbs with great care. And we see that in chapters 9 to 11. And in these chapters, these sayings echo much of what we've already covered. Okay? And that's why we're not going there for now. Maybe we'll go back at a later time to pick up on the themes, no? Because there are, of course, original material in these chapters. There are interesting things. If you look at, for example, chapter 11, one of the more contentious passages there. What does cast your bread upon the waters mean? Some say it's about investment. I still maintain it's about brewing beer. We can talk about that after the service. But then, we're not going to do that today. We're going to skip on that. We're going to go straight to chapter 12. The underlying thoughts we will find, beginning in chapter 9 to 11, is the same as what we heard in chapter 8. In the end, everyone dies. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. In our day and age, I guess, we don't think enough about our own debts. We are so entertained and occupied with so many other things and concerns, we forget that we are mortal. Maybe because now life expectancy is higher, infant mortality rate is lower. People don't tend to think like that anymore. But several generations ago, it was a very real thing. Death was always crouching at the door waiting. It's the same today. If you go out, I remember just earlier, when I parked the car and I held my daughter down, I said, follow me. Okay, we're going to walk around to the building. She actually went out to the street. It's a Sunday morning, no traffic. Okay? And we saw it, and we were alarmed. Why? Because it's a very real thing. You can die any moment. You can choke on your steak. You can figure into a weird accident, a freak accident. But we don't think like that. Especially as Asians. Don't talk about that. Yeah. But today we're going to focus on that. In the end, everyone dies. And because death is the great equalizer, what we learn from Kohelet, under the sun, he says, don't fuss over it. Just live it up. Because under the sun, this is as good as it gets. That's in chapter 9. Now, beginning in chapter 9, verse 11 to the end of chapter 11, Kohelet deals with the realities of risks and uncertainties. Uncertainties in day-to-day life, uncertainty of wisdom, uncertainties in economics, uncertainties in politics. Much of it could really just be said to be absurd and vanity. But today, I'd like to focus on the conclusion of the book. Here, the preacher is urging his readers with this statement, if he could borrow from a well-known evangelical preacher. Don't waste your youth. Don't waste your life. But more, don't waste your youth. And even at this point, I want to address the little children. Little children, I know your parents don't talk to you enough about the fact that one day you will die. Does Daddy tell you, Nash, that one day you will die? That you can die anywhere? You laugh, but it is the reality that we need actually to always come to grips with. And so children, as well as adults, this message is for all of us. If you bleed when you get cut, this is for you. Because you and I, one day, will have to face this truth. Kohelet says, as it were in this section, don't waste your youth. Don't waste your childhood. Don't waste your prime years. Even for those who are a bit older, don't waste your middle age. And here we want to learn three things from the passage. And these are on page 3 of your bulletin. Very simple. Number 1, why we shouldn't waste it. Number 2, what it means not to waste it. And number 3, how can we not waste it. Right? Very simple. Why, what, how. So let's look at number 1. Why we shouldn't waste our youth. Look at verses 1 and 2. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain. There's a song before, there's a sunshine, there's a rainbow after the rain. Here he's talking about the cloud returns after the rain. Bloom right after you. Kohelet urges us here with an eternal perspective. Remember your Creator. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. Lest you forget that you are not God. Lest you forget that you are not autonomous. There is one who created you. And if He is the Creator, He is the one to whom you should look for your purpose. And that's what Kohelet begins with. That's what he leads with. And then from there, he says, remember also your Creator before what? Before the evil days come. He's talking about the end of life. He's talking about when you begin to age. And the years draw near, of which you say, I have no pleasure in them. You know, your lolas and your lolas, because some of them, they're older now, and they don't find pleasure in the things that you find pleasure in. Lola, let's go to time zone. I find no pleasure in that. Before those days comes, he says, remember also your Creator. Death will come to us all. The question is, will you finish well? David Gibson says, and I quote, to die well means that you realize death is the limit God has placed on creatures who want to be gods. And I love that. To die well means that you realize death is the limit God has placed on creatures who want to be gods. Brings you all the way back to the garden, doesn't it? Adam and Eve wanted to be like God. They wanted to be gods. But death is God placing a limit on creatures who want to be gods. Yesterday, I had the privilege to attend a breakfast with a great man of God. His name is James Hudson Taylor IV, which makes him the great-great-grandson of the great pioneering missionary James Hudson Taylor I. He started China Inland Mission in the mid-late 19th century, which is now called OMF International. Okay? And J.B. Taylor, he's James Hudson Taylor IV, he was the speaker yesterday at the breakfast. He shared a wonderful message that was so simple from the book of Daniel, and based on an article that his father, James Hudson Taylor III, wrote before. And the title is very simple. It's called From Success to Significance. Success to significance. That is from earthly success to eternal significance. And he showed how you see that in the life of Daniel. In the life of Daniel. Daniel was a young man when he was taken to Babylon, right? And he went through rigorous Babylonian training. He was educated. He was there to serve Nebuchadnezzar. And so in a sense, there was earthly success. And he was successful, more successful, in fact, than any person who served in government ever. You see, to the end of the Babylonian exile, 70 years, Daniel was still there. But the difference was, none of that got to his head. Because in his heart was the right perspective. And that's essentially what he was sharing. From earthly success to eternal significance. And all of this is important because youth will ultimately lend to death. This is what we see right here in the first part of chapter 12. Now, the imagery is very vivid, isn't it? If you look at verses 3 to 5, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men are bent. Some people try to identify what these are. Okay? Is that the arms, the keepers of the house? The strong men are that the legs? No, they're bent. You're older. And the grinders, of course, that's the teeth, cease because they are few. And those who look through the windows, the eyes are dimmed, and the doors on the street are shut. When the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, old people usually say, "I don't get much sleep nowadays. As soon as I hear the birds chirping, I'm awake." That seems to be something that you can observe and hear with regularity. But I think, Kohelet's purpose here is not for us to identify what body parts exactly that those are. He's painting this portrait of old age. Like a house that used to be well structured, fresh paint, finished, and has been aged, as it were, through the years, weathered. Okay? And so he continues, he says, "And the doors on the street are shut when the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises at the sound of a bird, although the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms," maybe that's the white hair, The grasshopper drags itself along. Hey, think about that. Grasshoppers are agile. They're very fast. But then this grasshopper, he's old now. He's dragging himself along. And desire fails because man is going to his eternal home and the mourners go about the streets. Kohelet here paints a picture of the end of life. And if we're honest, it's not a pretty prospect. The reason why anti-aging products are so successful is because, let's face it, nobody wants to age. Little children, right now you're saying, I wish I were a grown-up so I can do everything that Papa and Mama does. I wish I am a grown-up so that I can do whatever I want. Can I give you a tip, little children? You're gonna grow up, and then you're gonna realize you're just older, but you don't get to do still what you want to do. Because society is gonna tell you what you need to do. That's what we call today adulting. Nobody wants to age. It's not a pretty prospect. It's not inviting. Some people try to temper that by saying, oh, but you'll get senior citizen card. You watch movies for free on Mondays in Quezon City. Free parking. You know, we try to soften the blow of age. But the reality is, it's not a pretty prospect. In fact, it's quite terrifying. The prospect of death should terrify you. The prospect of aging should terrify you. Young ones, you will one day also just be young ones. You can't stop it. And so, Kohelet begins with a reminder of this eternal perspective. He says, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. I remember this quote that our dear brother Ivan always recites. Those who wait to repent until the 11th hour often die at 10:30. So don't wait. Remember your Creator in your youth. This is why you should not waste your youth. Because you will age, you will die, and then comes judgment. And that's what we're finding here. But we have to remember Kohelet's perspective. This is all still within the perspective of the under the sun hypothesis. Questing in life apart from a loving relationship with God. Apart from a conscientious and conscious God principle. And that is why he actually closes this section. And in fact, he closes the whole under the sun section in verse 8. With his final analysis, he says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Now we've seen that as early as chapter 1, verse 2. Right? Chapter 1, verse 2 is the first bookend. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And then here in closing, chapter 12, verse 8, the bookend reappears. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And we need to appreciate that structure. The structure is pointing us to the framework of Kohelet's whole purpose in giving us these examples of questing under the sun. He says, under the sun, this is as good as it gets. You're gonna grow old, you're gonna die, and you're gonna face judgment. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Why should we not waste our youth? Because you won't always be young. and you don't know when it's gonna come for you. Next, what it means not to waste our youth. Chapter 12, verse 8, like we said, is the bookend. Vanity of vanities. Life under the sun. Kohelet now launches to his conclusion. He's shown us how life is lived apart from God. And he says it is vanity, which translates the Hebrew word havel or vapor. You are a mist. You are here for a moment and then gone. All of that, 70, 80 years, that's it. And it's meaningless, it says. Now look at verses 13 and 14. He says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is a whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Kohelet, having given us that framework of life under the sun, he says, okay, all has been heard. We come to the end of the matter. This is the way forward. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And this is very consistent with Hebrew wisdom literature. You see, you also see this idea of the fear of God in the book of Proverbs. In Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. And in verse 11, we know verse 10, but seldom do we read further. Verse 11 says, for. Okay, and so for this reason, for by me, this is wisdom speaking, your days will be multiplied and your years will be added to your life. Verse 12, if you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. End quote. And so, what does it mean to not waste our youth? What does it mean to consider also your Creator in your youth? If you are wise, you will fear God. And that's what Kohelet proposes. He says, end of the matter, all has been heard, this is what you should do. Fear God, obey His commands. Now the fear God part, we can understand. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Of course, yes. But then the second part seems to add to it a burden. You see, he says, keep His commands. Keep His law, Torah. But the problem is, there is no encouragement in this. And so under the sun, if all you're hearing is, there is a God, you're a sinner, and so, obey Him, it's not going to help you. It's going to crush you. It's going to drive you to the ground. Because no one can do that. There's no encouragement in this. We too are under the sun. And Kohelet, he gets close to it, but he doesn't give the right answer yet. And so we need to move further. Where can we get the power for it? On the one hand, he says, don't waste your life. You shouldn't waste it because you're going to die and you're going to face judgment. And then he says, this is what it means to not waste it. Fear God and obey His commands. So we know that's the way forward. That's the way beyond this trap of being under the sun. Fear God, obey His commands. But the question is, how can we not waste it? Where can we get the power for it? Now, I want you to understand, the wise words of Kohelet are not meant to provoke, are meant to provoke and challenge. This is what we see in verse 11. The wise words of the wise are like, the words of the wise are like goads. You know, goads, it's like the sticks with barbs to herd the sheep, no? To get them to follow along with the herd. They are like nails firmly fixed. Like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. Nails firmly fixed means they are unmoved. No? They are an anchor, in a sense, of wisdom. And so, Kohelet says, the words of the wise are like goads to keep you in step, and sometimes they will hurt you. They are like nails firmly fixed. And there's a clear thrust in all of this. This epilogue tells us more about who Kohelet was as a teacher who arranged proverbs and taught the truth. Right? Look at verse 10. It says, 9 and 10, besides being wise, the preacher also taught people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. And then verse 10, the preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. There's something here to be learned for us, especially those of us who find ourselves surprisingly in some debates. Kohelet said the preacher sought to find words on the one hand of delight, pleasing words, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. So his words were on the one hand pleasing, but they were also uncompromisingly true. Something to learn there. A lesson for us to remember is that grace and truth must always go together. And so here, as we get to the end of the book, we keep that in mind. Although he's been giving us this proposal of what it means like to live life under the sun, he's not being cruel. He's not saying, this is as good as it gets, and all of you, that's your lot. That's why he framed it with vanity of vanities, all is vanity. The entire book is meant to challenge the godless, the under-the-sun approach to life. And this has been the framework that we followed throughout our study. And what we found, and just by way of review, could be summed up as follows. Under the sun, there are roads, but they lead to dead ends. Under the sun, we are tossed from one season of life to the next by the tyrant called time. And that's why they say there's a time for everything. Under the sun, justice and righteousness are misplaced. Under the sun, there is no escape from tragedies. Under the sun, nothing is certain. Under the sun, there can only be a resigned realism. Under the sun, inequities abound. The preacher has sought through all of these to find meaning, but ultimately his conclusion has remained the same. Under the sun, life is meaningless. We see this also as a modern, in the modern expression of those who would deny the existence of God, but who would want to still have grounding for their morality. But if you're honest, like Nietzsche, there's nothing to ground it on. And you must rise above it as if you can. And be an Ubermensch. Under the sun, life is meaningless. So what's the alternative? If the preacher's final words to us are, don't waste your youth, be dutiful, fear God, and keep His commandments. How exactly are we to do this? Where are we going to get the power to do this, since we are part of the broken, fallen system under the sun? We can never do what God requires. In the latter part of verse 12, we read these wise words, and this is Ecclesiastes. And not just Kohelet's words are given by, look at verse 12. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Verse 11. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. Kohelet is trying to tell us something here about God. It's interesting that Kohelet's reference is to a shepherd. One shepherd. One who takes care. One who provides. One who protects his sheep. Earlier he says, consider also your Creator in your youth. Now he identifies that same Creator with the one who gives the wise sayings. The one shepherd. We are the sheep, and without the shepherd, without acknowledging the shepherd from whom all this wisdom comes, we are lost. We cannot do what we are expected to do. Not constantly, at least. And so there's no hope to be found in fear God, obey His commands. That doesn't go nearly far enough to what we need. It doesn't give us the hope that we need. At least not completely. But someone else did. Someone else has done what we could not. Someone else has feared God and has obeyed His commands perfectly. The Lord Jesus Christ. And it is to Him, ultimately, that we must be pointed to. The one shepherd. Consider what Jesus says in John chapter 10, verse 7 and following. So Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I received from my Father. And so the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God, obey His command. But you can't do that. But someone else has. The one who gives these wise words. The one in the book of Proverbs who is the embodiment of wisdom. Who is here introduced to us as the one shepherd. You know, there's an amazing, there's so much richness to be found in the idea that we are sheep, that God is our shepherd. You see, sheep are some of the dumbest animals around. And it just shows that we too, as sinners, are fools who need to be led alone. But the hope for you and for me is that our shepherd is not one who is unable to sympathize. The reason why our shepherd lays down his life for the sheep is because our shepherd is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. He is shepherd, but he is made like one of us. And so my charge to you this morning, as we come to the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, is this. We've seen life under the sun. We've seen that within that framework of godlessness or no conscious God principle, all there is vanity. We will all die one day, sooner or later. Hopefully later than sooner. But sooner or later, death will overcome all of us. And there's no hope under the sun. There's only hope in the one shepherd who became sheep like us, who gave down his life so that we might in him have life. Let's pray. An Father, we give you thanks this morning as we close our study in the book of Ecclesiastes. This has indeed been an interesting journey through this wisdom book, which is often referred to as a strange book. But we give you thanks because the message that we find from it is that if we're just going to go ahead in this life, questing and seeking meaning in the things here down below, it's going to all just end up vain. It's all vanity, meaningless. And no matter how much money we amass, no matter how much fame we enjoy in this life, whether we be rich, whether we be poor, whether we be righteous, whether we be wicked, whether we be wise, whether we be fools, under the sun, death equalizes us all, and we will have to face judgment. And so, remind us today, Lord, as Kohelet urges, that we consider also our Creator in our youth. That even now, Lord, we would see with eternal perspective that there's nothing here under the sun for us. But Lord, you have made provision in your Son, in the one shepherd from whom all wisdom comes, who is the very embodiment of wisdom, and who came to seek and to save that which was lost. The shepherd who comes as the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And so, the end of the matter, all has been heard. May we hear the voice of Christ. We pray all these things.